So I've been doing all these recordings and then I realized I don't have an intro video. So the big question is,
What is the Deep Page Podcast?
so I figured I'd try to make books cool if I could find books that people would like. So we've got big books, little books, history books, religious books, books of all kinds. Some of them fiction, a lot of them nonfiction. You see, one of the biggest problems we have is that our corporate media gives us almost zero details. Without understanding the details, without knowing the data ourselves from the source material that they claim to be using, we're kind of sitting ducks. It makes us vulnerable to manipulation. And if you want to be free, which I do, I value freedom over safety even. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And find me on all these other social media platforms, Kai-Zen. And if you want to donate, should be a little link there at stoptheestablishment.com, and you can fund me, and so we can go big. We have to hold truth above all else, because without the truth, we'll lose everything. Peace. Welcome to the Deep Page Podcast. I'm your host, Kane, and for this week we talk about Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Ray Douglas Bradbury was an American author and screenwriter, one of the most celebrated 20th century American writers. He worked in a variety of modes, including fantasy, science fiction, horror, mystery, and realistic fiction. Bradbury was mainly known for his novel Fahrenheit 451, 1953, and his short story collections The Martian Chronicles, 1950, and The Illustrated Man, 1951. Most of his best-known work is speculative fiction, but he also worked in other genres such as the coming-of-age novel Dandelion Wine and the fictionalized memoir Green Shadows, White Well. He also wrote and consulted on screenplays and television scripts, including Moby Dick and It Came from Outer Space. Many of his works were adapted into television and film productions, as well as comic books. The New York Times called Bradbury the writer most responsible for bringing modern science fiction into the literary mainstream. Most recently had a chance to watch the movie Fahrenheit 451, which you should check out as well. I think they actually did a pretty good job in this. Some things around, which I'll mention as we go along. But it was pretty good, pretty close to the overall theme, the overall vibe that the book gives you. Few differences, but it's still definitely worth watching. So, as usual, I got about 10 major points that I want to go over, and probably will only get to half of them. That's fine. We can live with that. Often regarded as one of his best works, the novel presents a future American society where books are outlawed and firemen burn any that are found. The book's tagline explains the title is the temperature at which book paper catches fire and burns. The autoignition temperature of paper, Fahrenheit 451. The lead character, Guy Montag, is a fireman who becomes disillusioned with his role of censoring literature and destroying knowledge, eventually quitting his job and committing himself to the preservation of literary and cultural writings. The novel has been the subject of interpretations focusing on the historical role of book burning and suppressing dissenting ideas for change. In a 1956 radio interview, Bradbury said that he wrote Fahrenheit 451 because of his concerns at the time, during the McCarthy era, but the threat of book burning in the United States. In later years, he described the book as a commentary on how mass media reduces interest in reading literature. Indeed, indeed. So I guess this has actually had a couple adaptations over the years. The recent film, 2018, like I said, it's pretty good. It's worth watching, so give it a try. This kind of stuff has actually come up within the past several years. The idea that censorship in general, canceling people, I've kind of talked about that. Probably a bit too much, but that's fine. I think it's worth, being a little worried about. People getting canceled, people getting censored. And I wanted to bring up this guy right here, Andy No. Portland bookstore harassed by Antifa for selling Andy No's book. Bradbury was saying his concerns about the McCarthy era, and that was also about canceling people for being communists. People in Hollywood, there was a blacklist and all, when you got blacklisted for being a suspected communist. This was, of course, the Cold War era was just really getting hot, and McCarthy was going after anybody that remotely smelt like a communist. Terry Jones' plan to burn 200 copies of the Quran in Florida was widely condemned, but the unique symbolism of book burning has a long and sinister history. Go forward 10 years from that, from the Terry Jones guy, and now it's Antifa, which are Marxist, and now they want to cancel the guy's book who basically exposes their kind of activity and the fact that they're basically terrorists. Anybody who opposes them, the current administration is going to call the terrorist and not these guys, even though they did way more damage over the last year. So this book kind of goes along those lines of the things I've been talking about people getting canceled and censored and stuff. And that's why I bring up these books. That's why I brought up 1984. And in this future, the firemen are the guys that, instead of putting out the fires, they create the fires. And their job is almost like Gestapo or whatever. They go wherever their leads. People get tipped off, and then they go find the people with the books, and they go burn the books. In general, the whole society is very shallow. Everyone's very shallow. They don't care about life so much. They are entirely over entertained. The main character, Guy Montag, has just been going. It's the whole routine. They go from one house to another. One thing that kind of suddenly kind of shakes him loose a little bit is meeting this young woman, Clarice McClellan. And she's sort of an oddball compared to everyone else. And she says very stuff that kind of throws him off. Like, what? It makes him really think about the world he's living in. And her being so different draws a contrast compared to everyone else. Just talking about how the walls, the parlor walls as they call them. So a parlor is basically a room dedicated to entertainment. So she's saying here, I rarely watch the parlor walls or go to races or fun parks. So I have lots of time for crazy thoughts, I guess. Have you seen the 200-foot long billboards in the country beyond town? Did you know that once billboards were only 20 feet long, but cars started rushing by so quickly that they had to stretch the advertising out so it would last? Yeah, everybody's hauling ass on these roads. I mean, they're going like 120, 130 miles an hour on the highways in the story. So she just has kind of these very different thoughts, and it sort of captures his imagination. Now, in the movie version of it, in the movie version of Fahrenheit, instead of having a wife like he does in the book, Montag actually kind of starts a romantic relationship with Clarice McClellan. In the movie, she's not sort of like this girl next door. She's a little bit older, and she's sort of like a wild child, a criminal underground, a sort of rat on the streets. So it's definitely different, and I could kind of see why they didn't put the wife in the movie, and I'll give you the reason why. I mean, the whole situation with his wife in the story is like, oh man, but this is the way that people live. The wife is totally drugged out. The wife is totally drugged out, and it's this point that at one point he comes home and he finds that she's not alive, or she's barely breathing. And these technicians, it's like clockwork, they show up, they pump the blood out of her system, they pump her stomach, and then they put in new stuff, new nutrients and whatever. And here's just a little excerpt from that. They had this machine. They had two machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra down an echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed to the top in a slow boil. So, yeah. So these technicians come into the house and basically revive his wife. It's not a doctor situation. There's no doctor. You don't have to rush to the emergency room. These guys will run to your house, show up. Clean them out both ways, said the operator, standing over the silent woman. No use getting the stomach if you don't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood, and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang! A couple thousand times, and the brain just gives up. Just quits. And then Montag basically screams, stop! And that's kind of the nature of people in this society, at least the people that are drinking the Kool-Aid and not really thinking about anything deep. There's no deep philosophical beliefs or conversations, things that, none of that, because all of that material from which you would base those conversations on have been burned. People, they've kind of lost their appreciation for life around them, for other human life, their fellow human beings. Another point here, where Clarice, the young girl, the young woman, is talking to Montag about other kids. She says, sometimes I'm ancient. I'm afraid of children my own age. They kill each other. Did it always used to be that way? My uncle says, no. 6 of my friends have been shot in the last year alone. 10 of them died in car wrecks. I'm afraid of them, and they don't like me because I'm afraid. My uncle says his grandfather remembered when children didn't kill each other, but that was a long time ago when they had things different. I guess there's not much that way of discipline as far as the kids go, and they just kind of run around, drive around recklessly, shooting each other, running each other over. And I kind of see the way things are going right now. We know that crime has gone up in at least the major cities all around this country in the United States. And I see a lot of where there was riots, those turned into, well, they started out as protests, turned into riots, and then you had looting. And in some cases, people were shot. Like that retired police chief in St. Louis. Of course, he didn't get the media attention. He was a black man. had been a major part of the community, was an important figure, and no one really cared about that guy. But I see a lot of the looting and all of that. These are younger people. These are people that are got too much time on their hands and plenty of energy to make use of it. And where you have these situations, it's just exciting. It's like fun to these people. When you're younger, when you're especially a young male, remember, you just don't value things the same. And it's definitely in this book where that's totally the case, where people just don't value life. They don't value each other. They just don't have the same appreciation. We had Clarice McClellan, strange young woman that made Montag really think about things in a different way, kind of threw him off a little bit. And the next moment, Montag, this is what really changes things for him about less than halfway through the book. There's a woman who has been ratted out. Of course, everybody's a snitch, just like, in 1984 with the kids spying on the parents. So this is a common theme throughout these books. There's always snitches everywhere. They jump up in the fire truck and head out to this woman's house. They get in there. The woman is solitary, just sitting there, sort of almost like in a comatose manner. She won't budge, won't tell them where the books are. And they find the books anyway, and so they load the place up with kerosene. They spray kerosene everywhere so that they can light it all on fire, but she won't leave. So the woman knelt among the books, touching the drenched leather and cardboard, reading the gilt titles with her fingers while her eyes accused Montag. "You can never have my books," she said. "You know the law," said Beatty. Beatty's another major character, that being the chief on the squad, the chief of the fire department. "You know the law," said Beatty. "Where's your common sense? None of those books agree with each other. You've been locked up here for years with a regular damn Tower of Babel. Snap out of it. The people in those books never lived. Come on now." She shook her head. "The whole house is going up," said Beatty. The men walked clumsily to the door. They glanced back at Montag, who stood near the woman. "She won't come. Force her then." So there's this back and forth. Montag placed his hand on the woman's elbow. "You can come with me." "No," she said. "Thank you anyway." "I'm counting to 10." So they do the countdown, and she lights the match herself, drops it, catches herself on fire along with all the books in the rest of her house, because she didn't want to live in the world without those, and took her own life. And that moment where a person having their own principles, living by their principles to the point that they're willing to die for them, is a moment that really changes Montag. And he was never the same after watching this woman burn alive. Beatty catches on to the fact that Montag is slipping. He's getting too many of the wrong kind of ideas. He's having curiosities. And Beatty takes it upon himself to fully explain the nature of the world and why everything from before is swept away, why all that information, all the literature, all those things have been burned away, and that somehow makes a better society is basically what Beatty does. Shows up to the house, scares the crap out of Montag, who actually has a book hiding behind him under a pillow. And so he's pretty nervous at this point, and he's listening to Beatty's explanation. But just to kind of go on what I was saying earlier, that everything is very shallow Entertainment is shallow. Empty the theaters, save for the clowns, and furnish the rooms with glass walls and pretty colors running up and down the walls like confetti or blood or sherry or sauterne. You like baseball, don't you, Montauk? Baseball's a fine game. Bowling, don't you, Montauk? Bowling, yes, and golf. Golf is a fine game. Basketball, a fine game. Billiards, pool, football, fine games, all of them. More sports for everyone. Group spirit, fun. You don't have to think, eh? Organize and super organize, super sports, more cartoons in books, more pictures. The mind drinks less and less. Impatience. Highways full of crowds going somewhere, nowhere. The gasoline refugee. Towns turn into motels, people in nomadic surges from place to place, following the moon tides, living the night in the room where you slept this noon and I the night before. Authors full of evil thoughts, lock up your typewriters. They did. Magazines became a nice blend of vanilla tapioca. Books, so the damned snobbish critics said, were dishwater. No wonder books stopped selling, the critics said. But the public, knowing what it wanted, spinning happily, let the comic books survive. And the three-dimensional sex magazines, of course. There you have it, Montauk. Didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with, no. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick, thank God. Today, thanks to them, you can stay happy all the time. You're allowed to read comics, the good old confessions, or trade journals. Yes, but what about the firemen, then? Asked Montauk. Beatty leaned forward in the faint mist of smoke from his pipe. What more easily explained and all natural, with school turning out more runners, jumpers, racers, tinkerers, grabbers, snatchers, flyers, and swimmers instead of examiners. Critics, knowers, and imaginative creators, the word intellectual, of course, became the swear word it deserved to be. You always dread the unfamiliar. More here. Give the people contests they can win by remembering the words to more popular songs, or the names of the state capitals, or how much corn Iowa grew last year. Cram them full of non-combustible data, chock them so damn full of facts they feel stuffed, but absolutely brilliant with information. Then they'll feel their thinking, they'll get a sense of motion without moving, and they'll be happy, because facts of that sort don't change. Don't give them any slippery stuff like philosophy or sociology to tie things up with. That way lies melancholy. Any man who can take a TV wall apart and put it back together again, and most men can nowadays, is happier than any man who tries to slide rule, measure, and equate the universe, which just won't be measured or equated without making man feel bestial and lonely. So bring on your clubs and parties, your acrobats and magicians, your daredevils, jet cars, motorcycle, helicopters, your sex and heroin, more of everything to do with automatic reflex. If the drama is bad, if the film says nothing, if the play is hollow, sting me with the theremin loudly. I'll think I'm responding to the play, when it's only a tactile reaction to vibration. But I don't care. I just like solid entertainment. Shallow entertainment. That is the world in Fahrenheit 451. And Beatty is desperately hammering this in to Montauk to try and help him realize, wink wink, realize that the deeper thoughts of yesteryear are an inconvenience to the modern man. We have a lot of that nowadays. We have shallowness, especially younger people who kind of act that way anyway, right? kind of a little narcissistic when you're a kid. You don't want to admit your hand was just in the cookie jar and that sort of thing. You get older, you change, you start forming basic values. You start understanding that you have to maintain a certain kind of existence, that you have to maintain a certain type of behavior, because I don't want to be stolen from, so I'm not going to steal from somebody else. I'm not going to kill somebody else because I don't want to be killed. I don't want somebody that I love to be killed. So this is what common sense is. And I've actually had a conversation once. I was at this party. I was up in Oregon. It's like a birthday party. And you had these few of these ladies, these millennial ladies, and it came up that one of them says, common sense really doesn't exist. And of course I said, well, yeah, common sense isn't common, which is sort of a joke, but they're understanding the context of it. Obviously, they didn't understand that. And I wish I would have said this then, but just like I said, is it good to murder? Common sense tells us no. Now, if I would have asked all them that, is murder good? They would all said no. So then I would have said, so then we all commonly understand that murder is bad, or stealing, or, whatever else. You can make the list. 10 Commandments or whatever. So, a lot of this sort of the common sense is non-existent in Fahrenheit 451. And what you get out of that is shallowness and materialism, a constant need for instant gratification, and replaces any sort of deeper thoughts and emotions that we might have as human beings. One more part here, and this makes me think of every time we have an election. Ladies are sitting around and they're talking about different presidential contestants. Let's talk politics. Sounds fine, said Mrs. Bowles. I voted last election same as everyone, and I laid it on the line for President Noble. I think he's one of the nicest looking men ever to become president. Oh, but the man they ran against him. He wasn't much, was he? Kind of small and homely. And he didn't shave too close or comb his hair very well. What possessed the outs to run him? You just don't go running a little short man like that against a tall man. Besides, he's mumbled. Half the time I couldn't hear a word he said, and the words I did hear, I didn't understand. Fat, too, and he didn't dress to hide it. This is a serious problem in our elections because we've given up substance over to appearances. Nice smile, nice hair, smooth. Think of Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. Real smooth guys. And they didn't do that much good. I thought Clinton did. Well, I don't want to go into it, but just thinking about these smooth talking politicians, like you just have a good smile, be relatively articulate, just say the right things, look the right way, and people will vote for you. But that's, I guess, kind of the point I'm making, is that when you're shallow and you only look at appearances, the outside, never judge a book by its cover. And we still do it. We do it all the time, and we get fooled, and nothing really changes. Nothing really gets better because we're stuck, looking at just the appearance of things and not their deeper value and what deeper meaning they might have to us. So I think we've gotten a pretty good idea of what it's like in this version of the world brought to us by Ray Bradbury in Fahrenheit 451. Of course, I'm not going to give you too much of the ending. I never try to do that, although it's often very tempting. There's one scene in the book. I don't know if this is in the movie, but it's definitely in the book. And it's a scene that's similar to the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you guys have seen that movie, it's something like that. There's flamethrowers involved. Yeah. You should check it out. It's wild. It's really a wild part of the book. And of course, people end up catching to Montag, I guess I should say. Finds a friend. In the book, it's an older gentleman. I think it's like just kind of an older lady in the movie, but that helps him out, helps him leave town. He gets out of town because at one point, Beatty picks him up, acts like everything's okay. It's like, it's okay. Basically, just get back on the engine here, and we'll go right back to work and go back to normal, just like things used to be. But they end up showing up at Montag's house, so I'll just leave it at that, for you to find out what really happens to him. But it's a short read. It won't take you too long to read it. You can find it online. Unless you want it in your hand, you can order it that way too. And it's worth reading because it's always a very delicate thing, and we take it for granted. We have so much media. We have many books, but then people aren't sitting down to read as much, or if they are, it is fiction. So that's why I offer these books in the first few episodes for people to check out, because they help express the value not only of freedom in general, but control over information is very important. And our ability to have independence over what we get to absorb, that we're allowed an open press, a free press, which isn't about media corporations. It's about us as individuals. We all get to be our own little, researcher, journalist. It's actually incumbent upon us, I think, very important time for us to seek information and to make up our own mind about it. And then we make it clear that it's okay to think for ourselves and not to go with the crowd. And the social pressures are so bad right now that people are willing to say the dumbest things, to believe the dumbest things because their friends believe it. And their friends could really suck and just be dumbed down. So let's not be dumbed down. Let's read a little bit and keep an actual open mind. An open mind isn't just about race or about gender, or these sort of intersectionalism that people keep squabbling over. It's bad for our society. And some of the people who think they're the most open-minded are the ones that want people to get canceled because they think there's some sort of threat to their way of living, when that's just not always the case. So check out Fahrenheit 451. Check out my other videos. I'm on several platforms, but you can find me on YouTube, at least for now. And also check out stoptheestablishment.com. I'll have the latest videos there, along with a couple other links where you can check out some stuff that is too hot for YouTube, and you can donate. But as far as the channel you're watching me on, give me a like, give me a share. Please share it so other people have the chance to watch it. And subscribe. Be checking out Color, Communism, and Common Sense by Manning Johnson, a black man who was recruited into the communist cause back in the early half of the last century. I would say the 30s or 40s is when he really got involved. And he basically exposes some things about some of these communist operators and how some of his fellow black men were basically used to further the cause. In some cases, they're bribed or they're black men. I try to keep these videos a little bit shorter. Went pretty long on Brave New World, but it's, I started out with 2 hours on that one. I cut it down to an hour, so I cut like half of the material I started out with, just to give you an idea. But I try to keep these recordings shorter so I don't spend as much time editing, because I got to edit the audio, I got to edit the video, I add in images, some video where it's useful, just to mix things up a little bit. But we try to keep these short and sweet, to the point. So next week, Color, Communism, and Common Sense by Manning Johnson. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification button. And if you want, you can donate at stoptheestablishment.com. Appreciate you guys. See you next time. Bye.